So, as we continue on in our series about Joseph, we're going to discover that God was with him. Even when those around him were making life choices that made his life hard or difficult, God was kind to Joseph. This is what we're told in Genesis 39. God was with Joseph at Potiphar's house, and he helped him. And so everything that Joseph did, it actually turned out very good. And Potiphar started to notice. And so he put Joseph in charge of everything. He didn't have to worry about anything because Joseph was taking care of it. In fact, he saw that his family and his servants and even his fields were blessed because of Joseph. Now, Joseph was a very good looking young man, and he was very strong. And Potiphar's wife, she started to notice. And she would go up to him and say, "Make love to me." And Joseph's like, no, no, no. No one is greater than me in my master's house. He trusts me. This is evil. This is a sin in the eyes of God. No. But every single day, Potiphar's wife would go to him and say, "Come make love to me." And Joseph would say, "No." And he would avoid her and walk away. Well, one day, Joseph had gone into the house to do some work, and everyone in the house had left except Potiphar's wife. She went up to Joseph and she grabbed a hold of his coat and she said, "Make love to me." And he literally ran out of his coat and left his coat behind. So she screamed out as loud as she could, and all the servants came running into where she was at. And she said, "That Hebrew slave came in here and tried to rape me. When I screamed, he'd left his coat. Look." She held on to that coat until her husband Potiphar returned. And she told Potiphar that Joseph had tried to rape her when she showed him the coat. Potiphar was so angry, he just had Joseph thrown into jail. But God was with Joseph, and God was kind to him. And the jailer, he liked him. He learned that he could trust Joseph, and he didn't have to worry when Joseph was around. So he started to put Joseph in charge. And God was with him and helped him and gave him success in everything that he did. In Genesis 40, we are told this story about Joseph. Well, some time had passed, and two men were sent to the jail, and Joseph was put in charge of them. One was the cupbearer to the king. He was the one that took care of the king's drinks, and the other was the baker. One day, when Joseph was walking around in the jail, he noticed that both of them were very sad. And he said to them, "Why are you so sad today?" And they said, "Well, last night, both of us, we had a dream, but there's no one here to interpret our dreams." And Joseph said, "Well, God can interpret dreams. Tell me, what did you dream?" Well, the cupbearers shared. Well, there was these vines, and out of these vines there were three, and there were buds coming out of the vines, and out of the buds were flowers, and then from the flowers there were grapes. And then I was with the king, and I was serving the king his cup again. And Joseph said, "Your dream means that the three vines are representing 3 days, and in 3 days you will be asked to return to the king, and you will start to serve the king his cup again. But when you do, will you do me a favor? Will you tell him about me, remind him about me, because I don't deserve to be here. I didn't do anything." And the baker, when he heard the good interpretation for the cupbearer's dream, he went ahead and he told Joseph his dream. He goes, in my dream, I dreamt that there were 3 baskets on my head. And in the top basket was all of this bread. And these birds were coming and they were pecking and eating the bread out of the basket. And Joseph said, well, the 3 baskets also represent 3 days. And in 3 days, you will be taken out of the jail, but you will be hung, and the birds will eat of your flesh. Well, 3 days later, the king's birthday was happening, and they were having this huge celebration to celebrate the king. And so he decided to get the baker and the cupbearer out of jail. But he hung the baker, and he did put the cupbearer back to serving him his drinks. But the cupbearer, he forgot to tell him about Joseph. So in Genesis 41, the story continues. 2 years passed, and the king had a dream. He dreamt that up out of the Nile came 7 cows that ate on the riverbank, and they were fat. But then out came 7 thin, ugly cows, and they ate up the fat cows. The king went back to sleep. He had a second dream, and in the second dream, 7 heads of fat wheat came up from one stem, and then 7 thin heads of wheat came and ate up that wheat. Well, when the king woke up, he was very disturbed, so he called all the wise men and the magicians in to ask them to tell him what his dreams meant. But no one was able to tell him what they meant. And this is when the cupbearer remembered, oh, Joseph. And he said to the king, do you remember when you were angry with me and the baker and you put us in jail? Well, both of us had dreams, and at the same time there was this man in jail, and he was able to tell us what our dreams meant. In fact, everything that he said ended up happening exactly as he said it. So the king called for Joseph to come, and so they had Joseph cleaned up and shaved and put new clothes on him and sent him in to the king. And the king said, I have had a dream too, and no one can tell me what they mean. And then he began to explain to Joseph about the 7 fat cows and the thin cows eating them, and then the 7 grains of wheat and the thin wheat eating them. And Joseph said, I cannot interpret this dream, but God can. And then he told the king, it's happened twice because it's certain. This is going to be what will occur. And so God is telling you these things because he's preparing you, and it's going to happen soon. So the 2 dreams mean the same thing. The 7 cows and 7 wheat represent that 7 years. And so you're going to have 7 years of good food available. That's what the fat cows and the fat wheat represent. But the thin cows and the thin wheat, those represent that there will be no food, there will be a famine. And so this is what's going to happen, and it's going to happen soon. So you need to get a wise leader put in place so that food can be gathered and saved for 7 years, for the 7 years that the famine will come. And the king said, oh, you are the wisest of all men. God has surely given this to you. And he really liked what Joseph had to say. So he told Joseph, I am going to put you in charge of all of Egypt under me. No one will be greater than you but me. And he took off his ring and he gave it to Joseph. And then he put him in fine clothes and gave him a gold necklace and put him in a chariot and had him riding around where everyone was shouting. And they were saying, make way. Well, Joseph was about 30 years old when this happened. And the king even gave him a wife. And so he set out and he began riding out all over Egypt. driving around and telling the people, you need to gather the food, you need to save the food. And they gathered so much wheat that they no longer could count it because it was more than the sand in the sea. It was immeasurable. And Joseph felt so blessed. He then had 2 sons with his wife, and with his first son, he named him Manasseh. And he said, because God has let me forget my troubles. His second son, he named him Ephraim, because he said, God has helped me. Well, the 7 years passed, and the famine began, and there was no more food in the land. So Joseph made the food available so that people could come and purchase it. And from all the nations, people were coming to Egypt so that they could get food from Egypt because they had saved their food. May God honor the telling of his word. It's pretty amazing, the journey that Joseph went on, from being sold into slavery to being next to the king and leadership. What is it that Joseph did that enabled him to be placed where he was placed to do what he did? What did Joseph say about God? How did he honor God? And how did he honor the people? It's so important to be in the Word, to be with Jesus, and be transformed. Shalom, y'all.